You're supposed to have the phone on. That's supposed to take your check over, and you can't have your. Although a lot of people do yours, just make sure you're not getting it. I realize that was there in mom. You have to learn, right? I want to learn mom.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into Cover 4 Live. My name is Brandon Adams. Get the rest of the Dog Nation team on hand with us. Connor Riley, Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel. As well. We have quite an interesting day here. Quite a lot to talk about. A little music to set the mood there. Fight on from USC for, I guess, no particular reason other than what Jeff Sintel has reported at DogNation.com. The potential here, I would say strong potential on the basis of the words used in the story, that former five-star quarterback JT Daniels started as a freshman at USC in 2018, began the season last year as USC starter before getting injured week one. Looks like he could be on his way to Georgia. Jeff, you wrote the story for DogNation.com. Tell us more about what you wrote or maybe what you've learned since the story has published as it involves JT Daniels and his potential of ending up at UGA.
Yeah. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Certainly an eventful day. We were kind of remarking off air that I think Connor Riley wrote this week that Georgia doesn't get any commitments out of Metro Atlanta, and then the next day they get an elite corner out of Gwinnett County, no less. And then Brandon, I think you podcasted recently about drama-free recruiting, and what do we have here? We have a lightning strike or a thunderbolt with a potential five-star transfer quarterback. I guess the thing to think about that jumps out at me is, first of all, people want to know, should it happen? That's another story for another Cover 4, or maybe questions 4 or 5. Is it happening? The information that I'm getting certainly indicates that is going to happen. It's not a question of if, more like when. I think the greater mysteries to unravel here then is, how would a JT Daniels transfer to Georgia? Would he get immediate eligibility? That would require an NCAA waiver. What does that mean for Dwan Mathis, Jamie Newman, Brock Vandegrift? Lots of things to get into with all this. But I think the one thing people should understand is, this is what I tell, when families ask me about what's the dark side of recruiting, everything seems great. I just tell them a lot of times, I say, folks, you can count on the college football program to do one thing nearly 100% of the time, and they're going to do the best thing for their roster at all times. And if you can add a JT Daniels to the mix, that certainly adds an intriguing quarterback room. Big takeaway for me, Brandon, is since Jake Fromm left the Georgia job, there will be 5 if JT Daniels comes into the program. There will be 5 new quarterbacks in Athens for the 2020 season.
Yeah, it started off that Georgia might not have enough quarterbacks. Now, essentially, it looks like they're going to be executing the Manning Pass Academy during summer practice. It's quite amazing how things have changed. There'll be a lot of opinions expressed on this, with the possibility that JT Daniels is on his way to UGA, could be on the verge of enrolling and being a transfer to this program. I'll share the first opinion here in that I don't think this story impacts Jamie Newman very much at all. Frankly, I still am not quite so sure that JT Daniels is going to be eligible right away for the 2020 season if he does transfer to Georgia. And if he does, frankly, my prediction would be that Jamie Newman would likely still be the starting quarterback for this team, even in the event that Daniels were to be eligible. However, in terms of Georgia maintaining its status as a national championship contender beyond 2020, I think the presence of a guy like Daniels, because he is a former 5-star, because he does have experience, I think it makes it more likely that Georgia stays very much in the thick of that championship conversation. Let's just be real here for a moment. Then Georgia opens the 2021 season against Clemson in Charlotte. The idea that Georgia would have a freshman quarterback in that game that's never played before. Now Clemson's going to be inexperienced at the quarterback position for that game there as well. Maybe DJ Uyunglele, who spent the previous season as a backup. But the idea that you're trying to beat Clemson with a guy that's never played before seems like a daunting task. If JT Daniels is your starting quarterback at the beginning of the 2021 season, at least, I think it just extends the window in which Georgia is a national championship contender. Mike, what are your thoughts about the news that could be on the verge of taking place?
Great story from Jeff. It was interesting to see that come out. This is a capable quarterback. I mean, JT Daniels is a guy that, he wouldn't be coming to Georgia to sit. And, as we just all try and wrap our brain around it, doesn't seem like he'd want to transfer into somewhere and just sit for a year. He could do that in Southern Cal. And, Keaton Slovis is a guy that had a couple injuries last year. So there are some striking resemblances to what happened with Jacob Eason and Jake Fromm, though. Second-year quarterback gets injured in the first game. Freshman comes in, wins the job. And while Slovis didn't lead the Trojans to a national championship, he put up remarkable numbers. And, he was one of the Freshman of the Year award winners, one of 3 quarterbacks recognized last year. So this is big news. I think there will be a trickle-down effect at Georgia. I think those things are being talked about as we talked right now. I mean, everybody's trying to wrap their brain around what it means. But, my takeaway is, Kirby wants to win now. And sometimes we don't listen to him. Sometimes we just write it off and say it's coach speak. When Kirby says there's going to be competition for the position, or when Kirby says they don't know what they've got there. I'm going to take Kirby Smart at his word, BA. I think this means that Kirby Smart isn't comfortable with what he has at quarterback right now. And if Daniels is coming in, he's coming in to win the job this year.
Well, let me set the mood here just a little bit more. Let me give you a little bit more music, a little USC music there to just kind of sort of set the tone and appropriate here with the news that JT Daniels might be coming to Georgia. Connor, your thoughts? What do you think about this as it's kind of playing out?
Yeah, I think you made a really interesting point. I part of me wonders if this is more a move for 2021 than it necessarily is for 2020. We're probably 6-7 minutes in now, and no one has mentioned the fact that he tore up his ACL and tore his meniscus in the first game of last season. ACL injuries, as we know, are always tricky, and it's not necessarily a guarantee that he bounces back or looks anything or even improves upon the player that we saw. Following, the Pac-12 a little bit, knowing what I know about it, you look at the quarterbacks that have played for Clay Helton. Sam Darnold put up monster numbers there. Keaton Slovis last year, when he played, put up big numbers there. But JT Daniels, when he was the starter for that team in 2018, it was, did not put up big numbers, only 14 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. And you can say, yes, the talent level as a whole at USC was down that season. But I do think there's a pause for concern about, he's coming off a knee injury. And while playing in an offensive-friendly system that had very good wide receivers, Michael Pittman just went in the second round. They've recruited very well. They have good receivers there in the past. Expecting Daniels to be this 5-star player because that's what he was as a recruit, I don't necessarily think is all that smart of an idea.
So, Connor, what I'll say, though, is that if you give me the choice in 2021, I'm speaking as a fan here, you give me the choice of playing Brock Vandagriff, who I do really like, or playing JT Daniels, given the fact that he has experience at the major college level, I'll take Daniels over Vandagriff, at least at the beginning of the season, I believe. Do you think I'm wrong for feeling that?
No, I would agree. I think you look at the history of freshman quarterbacks. Traditionally, at times during the course of the year, they struggle. And you can, while yes, Jake Fromm and Jalen Hurts had great, freshman campaigns and got to a national title game. You look at how they played against elite defenses. Jake Fromm against Auburn and Alabama. Jalen Hurts against Clemson, ironically, in that national title game. He struggled. Those guys struggled in those games, and you can even make an argument that because those guys weren't good enough, they lost that game. So to put Brock Van – and those were games at the end of the year when they already had 13, 14 starts under their belt. Putting Brock Vandagriff out there for the first game of the year against an elite Clemson team, and Clemson is going to be elite in 2021 even if Trevor Lawrence isn't their quarterback, I would probably feel more comfortable at a guy who has at least played somewhat and somewhat gotten adjusted to the speed at the college level than, say, a Brock Vandagriff.
Jeff, let me bring you back in on this. I want you to respond to my opinion. I want to make very clear how I feel about this. I don't believe the potential move of Daniels to Georgia, assuming it goes down, it seems like it's on the verge of happening. I don't think this is a referendum on Jamie Newman in any form or fashion. My expectation is one way or another that Newman is still the starting quarterback for Georgia in 2020. If anything, I'll go so far as to say this. The fact that Georgia is looking beyond Newman with a quarterback that looks very similar to what they've had in the past to me means they made a different kind of evaluation on Jamie Newman, not bringing him in because they wanted to dramatically change up the pace and have a more of a running quarterback than what they've had before, but evaluating the options that were available for the 2020 cycle in the transfer market, deciding that Newman was the best that was available, even though there were other quarterbacks that look a lot more like what JT Daniels looks like. Georgia still chose to go the route of Jamie Newman. I'm not projecting to be a Heisman finalist, nor am I projecting to be a first-round pick. But I am comfortable saying, barring injury, I believe that Jamie Newman will be Georgia's starter in 2020.
Yeah, Brandon, I don't. Maybe I look at it a different way because Newman. I guess the first lightning strike. I think Mike's used that word before in the past. I think the first lightning strike for me is: are you going to tell me that JT Daniels gets immediate eligibility? Because if that's the case, you could look at JT Daniels and how much he's played. I think he only has 14 starts, maybe 13 starts at USC. That's not much different than Newman's. I think Newman has something like 16, 17 career starts at Wake Forest. The first thing I want to bring to attention, these are things that are swirling through my head, is number one, you've got, I think everybody looks at the JT Daniels freshman year at Southern Cal and says, wow, those numbers don't really blow your skirt up. There's another layer of context you got to remember there. And I think people, when they start to learn the name JT Daniels, you got to remember this, is JT Daniels basically did what Carson Beck was asked to do by Georgia a year ago for USC. That was when he had 3 seasons of high school football under his belt. And he was able to reclassify and get ready and enroll in June. And really what would have been his senior year of high school football, he was the starter at USC. So there's maybe an asterisk I'd put together with what JT Daniels did his first season at USC. I think he threw for over 10,000 yards. He had a 67 touchdown season for Mater Dei, Brandon. As you know, the way that high school football across the country, Mater Dei is one of the top 10 programs in the country nationally, maybe top 15 by anybody's standard. So what he's been able to do coming in is very strong. You start thinking about Newman, and that's why I went to that lightning bolt I'll go back to. JT Daniels, if he is immediately eligible, then really Jamie Newman doesn't have a whole lot of leadway on JT Daniels at all in terms of Monken's system, in terms of on-field reps, in terms of new offense. I think it says to me is kind of what we said earlier. I think Mike touched on it. It's Kirby being Kirby. I mean, if we know one thing about Smart, if you could tell him he could bring a 5-star running back into his program tomorrow, he'd try to figure out a way to do that on his roster. And I think that's what's happening here with JT Daniels. To me, when we start projecting for 2021, I'll resurface another name. I got to throw Carson Beck into that competition as well. I don't want everybody out there to immediately assume everyone can take their own opinions, but I don't think that is a stare down between JT Daniels and Brock Vandagriff for that Clemson game in the opener. I do think Carson Beck, with a year in the program at Georgia, he's going to have some legway in terms of holding off all the momentum with Brock Vandagriff, who is a considerable talent in his own right.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out when you start thinking about the 2021 season. And Mike, I'm the last person that tries to pretend to be a talent scout or a talent evaluator, but just based on the knee-jerk reaction of knowing what I know about both players, I'm comfortable right now saying for 2020, I think that Newman is the better option. But as Jeff kind of alluded to, in an NFL draft type of thinking, when you have a chance to go out and get best player available, you do so. If a former 5-star quarterback who has started at the major college level for a program that has produced a number of great quarterbacks, if you have a chance to get that player, you go get him, and then you figure it out later. I think that's clearly, what this is. I've kind of mocked Kirby before for saying the plan is there is no plan when it came to Fromm and Fields and the same team together in 2018. But in terms of not quite having the full plan figured out for how JT Daniels fits into the picture for Georgia, I'm okay with that. Go get the talent, bring it in, figure out how it fits in with the rest of the pieces of the puzzle over the course of the next year or so. If that's the way this is going to play out, Mike, I got no problem with that whatsoever. I think Mike may be muted.
Tough freshman numbers, but in the opener, the guy's 25 of 34 for 316 yards before he hurts the knee. So all indications was that he was going to have a great second season. And I think we all know quarterbacks do grow and get better, particularly when the support cast gets better around him. Unfortunately, didn't happen for Jake Fromm. He lost a couple NFL running backs and receiver. But in this case, I'm not ready to say JT Daniels wouldn't have had a great year, because all indications, just talking to people, I've already called Southern Cal today and talked to a couple people out there. All indications was that this guy was going to have a great season. And when he went into the NCAA transfer portal on April 16th, the thought was that the NCAA was going to pass this one-time free transfer rule last Friday. You might remember it kind of got overshadowed last week when the NCAA set the June 1st date. But what else they did was they kind of shelved the immediate eligibility provision that's out there. So at that point, a lot of people at Southern Cal thought, well, this means JT Daniels is going to stick around. Now, why not just stay behind Keaton Slovis, who was also injured a couple times last year, and wait this thing out? The fact that he's decided to transfer makes you wonder, why would a guy leave California, especially in this time where travel is so complicated? Why would a guy leave California to come to Georgia and sit for a year? And that's what I think leads credence to the theory that Jeff's floated, and I guess I support, that this is a win now move. This is a move for now. And to your point, if it plays out where he doesn't get the waiver for whatever reason, or he doesn't beat out Jamie Newman, then fine, you've got another 5-star that can compete. But it's curious to me, and based on the things that Kirby Smart's been telling us, I know what the PFF ratings are. I know we've all gotten well, surely Jamie Newman's just going to come in and 6'4", 230 run. But Kirby's saying as late as today that they still don't know what the guys can handle. Brandon, if they don't know what Jamie Newman can handle at the end of May, and he's been on campus, he was on campus in January and February and half of March, in Zoom meetings in March and April and half of May. If Kirby's still saying they don't know what the offense can handle, that's a red flag. And that's what makes me think, it's a win now proposition for Kirby.
Well, but technically he just got his diploma from Wake Forest. So, there's still, plenty of time on that front. But, Connor, how do you feel about, last year we saw Justin Fields, granted they made immediate eligibility. His, displaced quarterback Tate Martell gets the immediate eligibility from Miami. But to my mind, after that, we pretty well saw the door shut. Now, these aren't quarterbacks, things of that nature. But whether it be Luke Ford or other names, the NCAA's mood on the transfer part of this seemed to really change. Demetrius Robertson had a fairly easy go of it, going from California back towards the state of Georgia a couple of years ago. But this is Daniels, a West Coast guy, now trying to come east, also after an injury, the way that Robertson had suffered one there as well. I'm just not quite so sure. I think the political wind blows in the direction of immediate eligibility the way that it was, even as much as it was last year.
Yeah, I think you look at the USC situation. Clay Helton is still the head coach there. Graham Harrell is still the quarterbacks and offensive coordinator there at USC. So Daniels can't really rely on the coaching turnover, coaching change thing that we sometimes see. He's from Southern California, being from Mater Dei, so it's not like he's moving closer to home to get there anyway. And I know Cade Mays isn't exactly a popular figure right now, but we still don't know if Cade Mays is going to be eligible to play this season. And I think he has a much better leg to stand on when it comes to NCAA eligibility from an immediate standpoint. And if we don't
Connor, I'll let you finish your point, but I want to add to this. My prediction is that Mays won't be eligible either. If I'm predicting, I'm saying Daniels might not be, probably won't. If that's my prediction anyway. My prediction on Mays would be that he likely wouldn't be granted the immediate eligibility either. It's just an opinion, but it is my opinion.
Yeah, and Mays moving closer to home, being with his family, there are theoretically an easier path to getting that right there, especially with Pittman, his offensive line coach, moving on to become the head coach at Arkansas. So and we really haven't seen any movement on this sort of new waivers or guys being granted immediate eligibility, obviously because of the COVID-19 outbreak. And I think with the NCAA moving the freshman or the one-time transfer rule to the next to the 2021 cycle, I do think that the NCAA might just say all transfers, hey, if you don't meet already predetermined requirements, which are an immediate nuclear family member that has become ill or going through hardships, or within 100 miles of your hometown, then we're just not going to accept you. And I think that's sort of the way I would view this right now, just given all the NCAA has already on its plate dealing with the COVID-19 outbreak.
Jeff, my opinion on this in terms of how it impacts Georgia from a recruiting standpoint, if Daniels comes here, all of a sudden this feels like a very different kind of recruiting program at the quarterback position. I thought Newman was a big get when Georgia got him. Brock Vandagriff, the class of 2021, there's obviously a lot to like about him. Daniels is a pretty big coup. I mean, to ask Tennessee fans how much they would have liked to have had him back in April when the rumors were that's where Daniels might be going. If Buster Faulkner, Todd Monken are teaming up together and they're getting this kind of quarterback, stacking this kind of quarterback depth at Georgia, all of a sudden the way in which Georgia recruits the quarterback position all of a sudden feels a little bit more impressive than maybe it would have, prior to the Daniels news.
Yeah, Brendan, I think what this staff is doing when they have this defense and they're ready to win now is I think they recruit maybe the way some folks, some Dog Nation loyalists look at recruiting boards. They want to hear about the 2021 guys, the 2020 guys that'll play right away. They don't want to hear about the 2022 Gunnar Stocktons, the 2023 prospects going forward, the NJ Morris is in 2022. They want to just try and figure out a guy that's ready to win now. I want to make sure we get this point at some point in the conversation. And I kind of see it two prongs here. There is the situation here, and folks, you don't have to be a reporter with 20 years of experience to sit there and go, what does this say about not just Jamie Newman, but what does it say about Dwan Mathis? What does it say about that health situation there? And under the umbrella of health, I'll just bring up something else. Georgia, by and large, aside from the Eason injury against Appalachian State in 2017, they had impeccable health at the quarterback position. Meanwhile, schools like USC, which Mike brought up, Alabama, of all places, there have been injuries at the quarterback position. And I think maybe it's not just a load 'em up mentality to make sure you have one guy as your trigger man, but maybe two or maybe three. And you don't want one of those two to be a true freshman. I think that's as much as the win now mentality that we have here for the Georgia Bulldogs football program. It is simply he's so highly regarded. It's not lost on me. I put in the story that number 1 rated quarterback in 2018, that was Trevor Lawrence. The number 2 rated quarterback in 2018, that was Justin Fields, who was the number 3 rated quarterback when he reclassified and skipped his senior season. Well, that was JT Daniels, and you have potentially a JT Daniels type talent coming into the Georgia program. It just speaks to the game's most important position. You got to realize that. And I don't even know an opinion on what we were just sort of surfing through a second ago, Brandon, and for everyone. I don't know if we can look at Tate Martell and Cade Mays and Justin Fields and all those guys and look at those NCAA abilities and NCAA clearances and wonder, in the age of the coronavirus and this pandemic, is the rule book still going to be interpreted the same way in terms of hardships and leniencies, in terms of, the state of California right now, the ability for him to come play at Georgia? I just can't think. And this is me just being a logical fella here. I didn't stay in a Holiday Inn last night, but you see me now, I'm at a tennis court with my kids. But for me, I don't see why JT Daniels makes this move to Georgia unless he could be eligible to play right away or feels empowered to think he could play right away. Otherwise, why not transfer somewhere else in Cali or stick it out where Keaton Slovis, as Mike said, he's already shown that he's taken some injuries in his career. I mean, the most easy playing path for him would be probably not dealing with the NCAA and sticking it out there with USC.
Mike, I want to read you this comment from Logan White on Facebook, who says, with Georgia fans, it's either we don't have enough quarterbacks or we got too many quarterbacks. And he kind of laughs and mocks and makes fun of that, which I understand where that's coming from. And I think I kind of agree with the premise that Logan's setting up here. If you're a UGA fan, the presence of another player of Daniel's capacity, I think should be treated as a very good piece of news. How does it all play out? If he comes, when is he eligible? How good would he be if he were to play quarterback? All those things are still, I think, to be determined. But when you add another potentially capable body into that quarterback competition for the fan, for lengthening that window in which Georgia is a very legit national championship competitor, the presence of a guy like Daniels is all good news, I think, on both those fronts.
Yeah, BA, it kind of reminds me when I covered the national title game a couple years ago, and I asked Dabo Sweeney about the dynamic of Trevor Lawrence and Kelly Bryant. Of course, we saw what happened at Georgia with Justin Fields and Jake Fromm, and Dabo's response was, I don't recruit backup quarterbacks, and neither does Kirby Smart. These are things that sort themselves out. And if a guy wants to stick it out and compete, I mean, I guess we were talking about Chase Bryce earlier, and he did for a few years, and now he's headed off to where did he end up? Duke, I think, something like that.
Duke.
So to me, it is good news. Now, what's different as opposed to other positions, and if you're a running back and they say, hey, Georgia just signed another 5-star running back, you go, bring them on. We got 30 carries a game, best man wins. I'll get my 6 or 10 cracks at it. If you're a quarterback, the politics are such, and geez, I don't want to go down this road again, but you don't know if you're ever really going to get a fair chance to be the quarterback, right? There's still some people that say Justin Fields didn't get a fair chance. Some people say that he did. I don't know. I think he did. Other people think he did, whatever. But at a different position, cornerback, linebacker, D-line, you can play more than one. And so really quarterback's a unique position. And even though quarterbacks don't go so far as to say, I want to be the only quarterback that you recruit, a lot of times you kind of get that feeling. And what's interesting about this is that you've already got Beck and Mathis, both saying, okay, if Jamie Newman's the guy this year, we've both still got 3 years left to battle and win this job. But now you're throwing another guy into the mix. And to me, that would indicate that ultimately somebody would leave. Maybe not immediately, maybe not before the season. Things would have to play out. But I would say that by next spring, all things being equal, you would not have Daniels, Mathis, Beck, and still have the highly ranked quarterback commitment at that point.
Connor, let me get to you on that subject, because Jay Bryan in our Facebook comment section says that I'm not mentioning Carson Beck enough. We have these discussions right here. I'll be quick to tell you two things. Anything can happen in a competition. Obviously, if you sort of fast forward ahead to any point in time, anybody can win it. However, my personal opinion is that in this particular discussion, experience does matter. Newman's got more experience playing Division I football than Beck and Mathis do. I would favor him because of that. Mathis has been on campus for a year in a way that Carson Beck has not. In the competition between those two guys, I slightly favor Mathis over Beck for that very reason. JT Daniels, if he comes in, has played as a starter in the Pac-12. I would favor him over guys that haven't played. Doesn't mean I'll be right. As I said before, anything can happen in a competition. But my personal handicap of that competition will be the guys who played the most, the guys who've been the closest to being a part of a college, environment. I would favor in the overall hierarchy and pecking order among those quarterbacks.
Yeah, and this goes back to a comment Mike made earlier about Jamie Newman and, the coaching staff, I guess, being unsure of him or, not 100% confident in what they have right now. On March 31st, Kirby said the position most impacted by the loss of practices is the quarterback position. You can sit there and study, and it's like taking a test. You can sit there and study for hours and hours on end, but you're really not going to know how you're going to do on it until you sit down, you actually do it. You actually get those reps and go through practice. So, I think to your larger point, experience does help and it does matter. And the more reps you've taken, especially, again, that 2021 game is going to be against Clemson, the first game of the season. That is something where if you got a guy who's played against good defenses before, played against Oregon, Washington, some of the big-time Pac-12 programs, I know that might be an oxymoron at this point in time, but he's played against real competition before. That's going to be worlds better than someone like, say, Brock Vandagriff, who was playing single-A Georgia high school football, or someone like Carson Beck, who, if it's Jamie Newman or JT Daniels here, I don't think anyone's expecting him to be the guy this year. He'll have gone at least a year without really playing and having serious reps at the quarterback position.
Let me go around the room with all three of you on the same topic for a moment. I'm really surprised in our comment sections on Facebook and YouTube that I'm speaking about as a fan to other fans here. I'm really surprised this isn't being treated as more of a universal good for UGA. Doesn't mean there aren't unanswered questions. When will he be eligible if he comes? What does that mean for the quarterbacks on the roster? I get the fact that there are unanswered questions, but I think it's a little bit weird that the UGA fans who are watching us on Facebook and YouTube right now, they aren't more consistently treating this as good news and sort of figure out what it means after the fact. Connor, let me start with you. What do you make of it, the fact that maybe the reaction to this is at least a little bit different than I thought it would be from UGA fans?
Do you ever know anyone that's been excited to see, a complicated math problem on the board?
Yeah, that's a good.
No, I think this is it is a complex issue involving both Newman and Daniels, as well as guys like Beck and Mathis, who I think are very popular with the fan base. And it is not an easy sort of thing to see. Whereas with you look at the Newman situation, it's pretty obvious Georgia wanted a more experienced quarterback in the 2020 at that position for the 2020 season, and Newman had way more of that than Stetson Bennett, Dwan Mathis, and Carson Beck. But when you bring in a guy like JT Daniels, it means, well, how unsure are you about Jamie Newman, and sort of casting doubt, I would say, over that decision. And to be frank and honest, Kirby Smart, his biggest sort of knock to this point has been how he's handled this quarterback position. And this just sort of adds more uncertainty to how he is going about handling it for the 2020 season, where Georgia figures to be one of the 10 best, if not probably 5 best teams in all of college football.
Mike, what about you on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think Connor's right. We'd all kind of gotten comfortable with the notion. I mean, Jamie Newman rides in on the horse. He's got a championship defense. He's efficient on offense. They run up tempo spread, and Georgia lives happily ever after. And this is a threat to that narrative. I mean, this is whoa, wait a minute. We thought the Georgia quarterback situation was just fine. And now we have to wonder, is it not just fine? Or is this just Kirby throwing another log on the fire? But when you throw another log on the fire, you might set the rest of the campground ablaze. I mean, because it's going to upset somebody. All of a sudden, now the fire's on somebody's shoe. Wait a minute. So it upsets the apple cart. But say this, Kirby Smart's here to win, man. And he does everything he can do to win. He is relentless. Nothing is off the board that's within the rule book. He's going to do it. He'll want to move a game. He'll want to add another guy. He'll get rid of James Coley, a good friend. He'll bring in a Matt Luke. He'll bring in a Todd Monken. He'll stick with a guy that had brain surgery. I mean, Kirby wants to wrap his arms. So is it as simple as you have the chance to add a 5-star quarterback? So why not? Or is this a red flag that maybe things aren't as settled with that offense, and maybe things haven't gone as hunky-dory as maybe we'd like to believe? Kirby hasn't told us that. That's the one thing I'll say, BA. Kirby hasn't come out and said, yep, sure does look good. Nope. He said, we don't know what these guys can handle. He said there's going to be a competition. I mean, listen to what he says. He's telling us this quarter, he has not told us Jamie Newman's the guy. And in fact, he's gone out of his way to make sure everybody knows there's still a competition.
Well, Kirby also says a lot of things. I mean, let's be honest about that. And I guess to play devil's advocate with you for a moment, what could Newman do that would be worthy of praise when they haven't been on campus together? I mean, I guess that's my question. It's like, I don't think this is a referendum on Newman, because I don't think Newman's had an opportunity to do anything that would make him be praised right now when they have been off campus for as long as they've been. I mean, what could you possibly see from Newman while he's quarantined at home that would be praiseworthy from Kirby Smart?
Well, I mean, that's the unknown. I mean, we don't know how the Zoom meetings have gone. We don't know how quickly he's picked. I mean, we know that today Kirby Smart said he still doesn't know what the offense can handle. I thought that was pretty telling. It seems to me that if Jamie Newman had grasped the offense and everything was on a rail, that wouldn't be what he would say. I mean, it just seemed like an odd thing to say, that they still don't know what guys in. Now, he could be referring to receivers, but then I would just say to you, if you're Kirby Smart, and you're comfortable with Newman, and I think we would all agree Carson Beck and Dwan Mathis both look pretty capable. If you're comfortable with Newman, then why do you make this move? You seem set to me with Beck, Mathis, and Vandegrift.
Because you got to have a quarterback in 2021. I mean, that to me is not a rhetorical question. You make this move because you have to have a quarterback in 2021. And maybe Carson Beck ends up being Y.A. Tittle. I mean, for all I know, he may be the greatest thing. Timely reference. But the point is, you make the move for JT Daniels, I believe, because you need a quarterback in 2021. And if it works out that JT Daniels ends up being eligible and starts in 2020, then I guess all the better for it. But you're bringing in Daniels because he has multiple years of eligibility remaining beyond this year, no matter what happens in the 2020 season. That's not an indictment of Beck. It's not an indictment of Mathis, nor is it an indictment of Brock Vandegrift, who's not gotten on campus yet. But Daniel's value is the fact that he's more than just a rent-a-player for 1 year, whereas Jamie Newman can't be, and the guy that if you had to bring another transfer the following year is another guy that's kind of going through a weird offseason where he's having to learn things pretty quickly. Mike, I want you to respond to this. I believe that Daniel's value to Georgia, assuming that he comes, is the fact that he is a multi-year proposition, whether he's eligible this year or not, or whether he beats out Newman even if he was healthy.
Right. As of now, he'd have 3 years to play 2. If he doesn't play this next year, he'd have 2 years left. The equivalent of a JUCO quarterback. I guess it's a risk reward thing, BA. And that's a Kirby Smart gamble to make. Again, is a USC quarterback that's got to sit out a year a better gamble than Carson Beck, Dwan Mathis, and Vandegrift? I mean, that seems like a heck of a gamble to me. But to flip it around.
But hold on, let me stop you for a second. I'm not trying to turn this into the you versus me thing because I want to get Jeff and Connor involved. But why is it a gamble at all? Like, what's the risk?
Too many quarterbacks in the quarterback room. Not enough reps to go around.
I don't know that I see it that way. Jeff, come in on this if you don't mind.
So, guys, let me jump in here. First of all, as I understand it, it's 3 years to play 3 because you have a redshirt season last year for
sophomore. If he sits out this year. If he sits out this year. But,
right. For me, honestly, I think it's a comparison, Brandon, not to Y.E. Tittle, but Otto Graham or perhaps Bart Starr.
Oh, guys, it's 2020. Let's use a 21st century quarterback, please.
Do you want Montana there?
Sure.
Is that too old?
Sometimes it's just more fun to say somebody really old.
Somebody that played in an era where there was color television, where they weren't playing in black and white.
Sometimes it's just fun to say a really old person's name.
So, and you guys have a great little, jousting match going on here, but I'm shocked we haven't gotten to this point yet in our conversation. To me, we thought Monken. Oh, look who Georgia's going after. Brock Vandegrift. Got some legs on this young man. Jamie Newman. Oh, Georgia's going to do something different. Well, the ability for Georgia to now get into the JT Daniels race, besides, he's a former 5-star. He's got a great arm. He's played major college football. To me, that says something that Georgia's not looking for that quarterback with legs and quarterback with options that maybe that they were trending to before. Look at the Gunnar Stocktons of the world. Look at the MJ Morris. There was a pattern there where Georgia was going after specific new type quarterbacks, and that was a departure from the Jake Fromm skill set. I think even JT Daniels, while he's not a dual threat that's going to run for 100 yards in a game, like an Otto Graham or Fran Tarkington did back in the days. But to me, this is a guy that, let's just call it what it is. He seems like a little bit more athletic Jake Fromm. And I don't know if that's the way Georgia was going.
So, Jeff, let me respond to that because I kind of mentioned this a moment ago. To me, what it says to me, and this is the way I think that Georgia should be, is evaluating quarterbacks individually on what they do, not saying that, hey, we want to have only running quarterbacks now or only quarterbacks that are prototypical pocket passers, but saying of the available pool of quarterbacks, who's the best player regardless of skill set? Because, frankly, if Georgia wanted to be in the JT Daniels style quarterback business, then it could have very easily gone and prioritized KJ Costello, who ended up going to Mississippi State out of Stanford to a play with Mike Leach. But seems like Georgia was fairly zeroed in on Jamie Newman fairly early, not because it wanted a running quarterback, maybe just because it thought that Newman was the best quarterback available for those 2020 transfers and for, the next sort of group of transfers, however you want to classify JT Daniels. Maybe he just looks like the best of that group, sort of evaluating guys individually on their skill set as opposed to saying we want a quarterback that fits in a certain kind of box.
One thing I think is important to keep in mind, you bring up Newman and Costello. Costello wasn't going to be able to go through spring drills, whereas Newman was. He was eligible. He was able to grad transfer immediately. And I do think that played a significant reason in why maybe Georgia perhaps targeted him, because at the time, back in January, before COVID was COVID, I think there was a lot of thought that, you get a guy in here, you get him those reps in spring practice, you get a better chance of seeing what you have in him earlier on. And that way, what you can install for what is a very tough start to the 2020 season with Virginia in a neutral site as of right now. And then 12 days later, going to Bryant-Denny Stadium to take on Alabama. Georgia, I don't think they're going to want to be messing around with their quarterback situation. I think they're going to want to know who is going to be that starter right away. And to Mike's point about too many quarterbacks in the room, if Georgia's trying to figure out reps and who the guy is, and they don't have an answer to that late August, even, after the Virginia game, if they still don't know who that guy is, that is a problem going into that Alabama game.
Yeah, and that's why, Connor, I've been a big believer in this. I don't mean to be cynical, but this notion that you're going to split reps during practice and have an open competition between multiple people on short notice for the start of the 2020 season, I don't believe that. They I believe, brought Jamie Newman in here because of how they saw him perform at Wake Forest. Not every game was perfect. Certainly he had his ups and down moments, but they saw something in him, I believe they thought made him the potential capable starter here at UGA. I think that they're not going to admit that he's won the job, but I think privately they're going to treat Jamie Newman as the starter, regardless of what Kirby Smart says during press conferences.
And one other point I want to make, because I saw this come up in the Facebook comment section, and the whole too many quarterbacks thing. The worry about Brock Vandagriff might go somewhere else. Brock Vandagriff wants to play close to home. The schools that he was looking at, Auburn. Well, Bo Nix is still going to be at Auburn a year from now. Brock Vandagriff is not going in year one at Auburn and beating out Bo Nix. South Carolina was a school that I believe had been mentioned. Ryan Helinski is still going to probably be the starter at South Carolina, assuming Will Muschamp is still the head coach there. So Brock Vandagriff, I think wherever he was going to go, was going to go to a place where there were perceived quarterback options already in place. And Vandagriff, he's not a guy that's afraid of competing. It's not a slam dunk. If we're acting on the assumption that Newman is the starter this year, Daniels, why he has more experience, Vandagriff very well could end up being a better player than Daniels would be by the time of that start of the 2021 season. And I don't think he's going to be afraid of Georgia bringing in a guy like JT Daniels, because in the 2022 recruiting class, they're probably going to bring in a highly recruited guy anyway.
Jeff, I think Connor's 100% right on that. Vandagriff, had he gone to Oklahoma where he was initially pledged, heck, Lincoln Riley brings in a transfer quarterback every single year. I mean, he had to be on guard against some of that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of with Connor on this. I only know Vandagriff through what I've seen from him in interviews, including the one that you did with him. But he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy scared off by a guy like JT Daniels, who may be a very good quarterback, but may not be as good as Brock Vandagriff, even coming in as a freshman. I don't see Vandagriff spooked by this. I can't speak for Beck and Mathis necessarily, but I don't think Vandagriff's going to be scared away by this.
Brandon, I think this would speak from my character sketches I've put together with all these guys, absent of Newman. I don't think anybody's worried about anybody coming into the room at Georgia, because you don't want a quarterback like that. I think if I could be a fly on the wall or the kitchen of all these quarterbacks right now, whether it's DeJuan or Carson Beck or Stetson Bennett or anybody, that just means, all right, let's go. Let's figure out who the best quarterback is. And I just keep coming back to Georgia's had so much security and the luxury of health, probably as good as anybody in college football over the last 3 years at the quarterback spot. Maybe you can talk about Sam Pittman's offensive line and those battleships protecting Jake Fromm all you want, but it's unlikely for Georgia to ever go a 3-year span again where the starter suffers 0 injuries, where he misses more than, I think, 1 or 2 snaps of competitive time. I think you see Alabama with Justin and Tua. You see now Clemson with Trevor and DJ. If you're trying to build your championship team, you're probably dropping the ball if you don't have 2 stud quarterbacks that can come play right away just for that one season. Now everybody can go about the portal and the next year and who gets the job and who's got the shot going in. But if you're heading into a season where you think you can win a championship and you don't think you have 2 quality quarterbacks with proven ability to win at the highest level, I think you're fooling yourself.
Mike, let me bring you on that, because I think that Jeff makes 2 really good points. First of all, when it comes to injuries at quarterback in the SEC, we've seen a good number of those impact some of the most important games. Alabama's dealt with theirs. Florida went through a quarterback change during the 2018 season. We have seen quarterback, actually at the beginning of the 2019 season, I should say, we've seen quarterback injuries matter in the SEC. And as far as the transfer portal goes, Kirby Smart's taking this topic head on. He has acknowledged that it's very hard to keep quarterbacks. Obviously, when you look at the entirety of the Georgia quarterbacking roster, if we want to, add Daniels in there for the sake of conversation right now, all those guys are not going to stay and remain in Georgia. That's just a fact of the matter. I don't know who becomes the odd man out. I won't even pretend to project the overall pecking order amongst the group. I've got my opinions, but those are just opinions. But the fact of life is Georgia will deal with the quarterback transfer portal in some form or fashion probably every year moving forward. Kirby's been fairly open about acknowledging that, has he not?
Yeah, no, he has right from the get-go, even before the Justin Fields situation played out. He talked about quarterback management and on the roster. You know, the curveball in this to me, and I think Jeff touched on it earlier, is JT Daniels doesn't seem to fit the offense that we think that George is going to get. Now, again, Kirby's been very careful to say, look, I don't have any grand proclamation about what this offense is going to be. But in terms of the skill sets of Jamie Newman and Dwan Mathis and Carson Palmer and Vandergrift even, you see guys that, you know, these guys got some mobility, right? You can see these guys, you know, getting outside the pocket. You can see a little bit of a quicker, faster offensive line, maybe doing a little bit more in space, getting on the – this guy doesn't seem to fit that particular offensive style. And that's the curveball in this is, well, then why are you bringing him in if he doesn't really fit the direction that the offense is going?
But why is it you say that? Why doesn't he fit?
He doesn't have the mobility. He doesn't have the mobility that these other quarterbacks have.
But, I mean, other than Jamie Newman, who's a proven runner, I mean, how much mobility does Mathis and Beck really have?
Mathis has a tremendous amount of ability. I mean, he's a 10-600 guy, and, you know, he can run. I mean, that's when, you know, going back to the G-Day game, seems like forever ago now, but, you know, Dwan can do some things with his legs for sure. That's one of his big things. That's why he was going to the Ohio State. He was committed there to be their quarterback because of that offense and run an offense that seems like Jamie Newman fits into here. And Carson Beck is also very athletic. And I don't know if people realize just how athletic Carson is, but he's a guy that can do some things in the open field and run as well. It's not like he's not Jalen Hurts, but he's a guy with good mobility. I would say, you know, I'm not going to say he's Joe Burrow because Burrow can throw the ball and put it in a dime, but Burrow's, I would say Beck is as athletic as Joe Burrow is what I would say.
I just couldn't make an educated comment that Beck is more athletic than JT Daniels is. I guess I wouldn't feel comfortable.
Yeah, I would, just based on talking to the people out there today about JT Daniels. You know, one of the things he did between his freshman year and his sophomore year when he got injured, he took a hit in the pocket. He did kind of redo his body. He did lose some weight. He did become more mobile. Even then, he didn't get through the first game. He took a hit in the pocket. And so I don't think his mobility, I think Connor actually nailed the analysis early on when he said a little bit better mobility than Jake Fromm, but not much. And certainly not in the classification of a Beck, a Mathis, or a Newman.
So Brandon, let me jump in here because I can lend something to this thought right here. So you've got this is what I know from, you know, seeing Beck a lot. Now Beck's probably a 4.8 guy, but he trains with Denny Thompson out of Jacksonville, and that's the same training group that works with Joey Gatewood. Everybody remembers Joey Gatewood, the dual threat quarterback that was at Auburn. Carson Beck's going to shuttle run and 5.10.5, about as good and even better than over those short distances that Joey Gatewood did when he was kind of brought in to run the Gus Malzahn offense at Auburn. And I guess the other greater point, I'm just going to say it. You know, anybody on the chat room, this feels like this is too cold-blooded college football. I'm sorry, anybody on our feeds, but here's the thing. Georgia's already had the best quarterback ever that will likely ever transfer out, hit the portal. You're talking about a number 1, number 2 overall draft pick. I don't think Georgia's worried about portal quarterbacks. What I'm thinking Georgia's focusing on is they got 4 or 5 guys here that all seem like they have a great measure of ability and potential. As long as they get 2 or 3 guys that remain coming out of this crucible that they can win with, that's the only thing they're concerned about. Now, I know a lot of people will sit there and go, oh, the kids and these players. I mean, that's just what it is. Georgia is going to get them on the field. Remember, Georgia was flirting with C.J. Stroud when they had Carson Beck coming in last year as well. They wanted to bring in C.J. Stroud, who wound up at Ohio State, on the heels of Carson Beck. So they're just going to figure out, you know what, we're going to put them on the field. The 1 or 2 that think that they can play and prove that they can play, that they're our quarterbacks for the future, are going to stay. And the ones that don't show it to us on our practice fields against our defense that's full of 5 stars and nationally rated with guys that are all going to go to the league, if you can't stick it out and prove it at Georgia on the practice field, they gave you your shot. They saw what you had, and they're going to be happy with who remains.
Connor.
The question I have, Mike brought up, you know, Georgia wanted to have more athletic guys, more running guys at the quarterback position. What from Todd Monken's offense in the past has shown us that that's what he wants? Brandon Whedon at Oklahoma State was pretty much a statue. Nick Mullins was not running around a whole lot back there. He was pretty limited to the pocket. Jameis Winston was not a dual threat quarterback at the NFL level, and neither was Ryan Fitzpatrick. And then even last year, you look at Baker Mayfield. Baker at the NFL level has had to do things from the pocket. And just because Kirby, I think, wants to get more athletic at the position, I don't necessarily think he wants to be running his quarterback around there as much as, say, like Jalen Hurts was or Lamar Jackson was at Louisville under Bobby Petrino. Yes, you can want to get more athletic back there, and I think Daniels is probably a more athletic Jake Fromm. But I don't know if any of us here thought that like Jamie Newman was going to come in and have 10 to 12 carries a game this year as a running quarterback. Did anyone think that?
Yeah, Connor, I see him as a quarterback who runs as opposed to a running quarterback. Because if all you are is a running quarterback, then NFL drafts don't typically favor that pretty well. You want to be a quarterback who runs as opposed to a quarterback who's thought of as running first. Ultimately, that's one of the reasons why a school like Georgia is attractive to Newman, so he can fully put his passing skills on display, because ultimately that's what gets you drafted. As in vogue as athletic quarterbacks are in the NFL right now, that athleticism can't come at the expense of being able to throw the football. Otherwise, you're not going to get the draft attention you want to get come April. Mike, how about you? A thought on that?
Yeah, the thought is that, what we've heard they've been working on, and, Kirby said they were able to do some things this year was, and the buzz that I'd gotten was they'd been doing more moving the pocket and moving quarterbacks around, and that there would be more RPOs in this offense. And the good news on an RPO offense is that it's relatively easy to learn compared with what Jake Fromm was doing. And, as far as why Jake Fromm didn't get injured, it had more to do with Jake Fromm than the offensive line. Jake made a lot of good reads. Jake was good at blitz pickup. Jake got rid of the ball quickly. The Senior Bowl guy came right on here and said there were issues with the Georgia offensive line. They weren't as good in protection as the numbers would suggest, so much as it was Jake Fromm. When he was asked at the NFL draft, and Connor was there with me, and they said, well, Jake, what do you say about not being a mobile quarterback and not being able to get out of trouble? And he said, well, I like to look at it that I read the field and I get out of trouble before I get in trouble, because he audibles to the right play, or he's able to call the right protection, or he's able to get rid of the ball quickly. So I think Jake Fromm probably deserves more credit for the lack of sacks and the bad negative down and distance. I think Jake Fromm's going to be a lot more missed than people realize, is what I'm thinking, even more so after today's news. But where it concerns the offense and where it's moving, why do we think that? We've seen offensive line trend to be smaller, maybe not smaller, but lighter and more athletic. That lends itself a little bit more to maybe what we saw Matt Luke bring at Ole Miss. Some shades of the Rich Rodriguez, maybe Hugh Freeze, maybe a different philosophy. We've seen Georgia go jumbo with offensive line before. They came within a snap of winning a national title, or a couple snaps. Don't know when you're going to have Sony Michel and Nick Chubb in the backfield again. So we all thought that because Kirby played out the jumbo hand, and it was only as good as it could be. And so, the current trend seems to be to get a little bit more faster, athletic, and be able to spread the field. And just as Kirby evolved defensively with the mint defense and that 3-4, all signs indicated that he was going to evolve, maybe not completely to the spread like in LSU, where they're actually throwing and running 50-50, but to a more mobile, more athletic system, which would take the drop back quarterback out of play. And while JT Daniels isn't a statue, I would refer to what Connor said as an accurate scout, only slightly more mobile than Jake Fromm. And I don't know when we'll see another quarterback that had the football IQ and acumen as Jake Fromm. I don't think JT Daniels can come in here and operate an offense like Jake did.
All right, before we're done, I want to hear from you, Mike, on what Kirby Smart had to say today as he met with some reporters briefly. Before that, Connor, Jeff, either of you have a final thought on the JT Daniels news, where it stands right now? Rumors, reports that he's on his way to Georgia. A lot of chatter about that. Jeff, from you, a final thought on this before we wrap up?
Yeah, guys, I think for me, the thing everybody's going to wait for is, there's a couple of questions in the news cycle we ought to probably shore up here. Number one, if the Daniels family was going to make a trip, if the Daniels family wanted to check out Georgia, you can't do that right now. You can't have an on-campus recruiting tour. Maybe this can happen through Zoom, a virtual visit. Maybe they can go look around the campus. They can go look around Athens. If this is as serious as we believe it to be, they can check out property, things like that, places to live. But there's not going to be an official visit with a tour or anything else like that, especially with the NCAA restrictions right now on COVID-19.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to get ready to start school, doesn't it? I mean, like it's about go time, showtime. Like the visit season's kind of passed, hasn't it?
Yeah. I think most of the guys will start showing up in the middle of next week. I think there'll be physicals. I don't know how much Kirby got into it, Mike, on the call today, but there'll be physicals. They have to have check-ins. They have to have acclimation. They have to even have a COVID-19 check as well in terms of everything like that when they're coming back into the program. But I mean, I would think that this news would be sorted out sooner rather than later. That's what everybody else has said today. And, we were able to source a lot of that on ourselves independently. But I think the thing is that the JT Daniels story will quickly evolve from Georgia whispers, Georgia buzz to heading to Georgia to what happens in terms of eligibility. And I think this JT Daniels narrative will either spike or either it will kind of get muffled a little bit depending on whether he's eligible to play in 2020.
Connor, how about a final thought from you on Daniels before we talk about Kirby today?
Yeah, I think Jeff's last point there is the most important one. If he's deemed immediately eligible, I think that changes the calculus for Georgia in the 2020 season. And hopefully, Kirby Smart's been hanging out with Will Hunting and knows how to solve those problems on the board. If, he's ruled that he's not eligible this season, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world for Georgia in the sense that he can come in, learn, get that knee another year completely healthy, and sort of grow from there. You look at a guy like, I think, Azeez Ojulari, where, he hurt his knee his senior year in high school, and he did not play a whole lot that first year that he was in Athens. But he learned a lot, and that, I think, really helped him and set him up very well for what you saw at the end of this in this 2019 season. And I think at that quarterback position, you could maybe potentially see something with Daniels like that in the 2021 campaign.
Quick final thought from me, then the floor is yours, Mike, to talk about Kirby from today. But I treat this as exceptional news that JT Daniels could be coming to Georgia, speaking as a fan for a moment. And that's not because I don't like the current Georgia quarterbacks. Really, in their own way, I like them all. I heard from Stetson Bennett last spring. I love the moxie with the way he spoke. I think Dwan Mathis' story is incredibly inspiring. He comes across a really cool dude. He's obviously loved his time thus far at Georgia, and we saw him at G-Day. And sometimes when I'm at practice, what I've seen from him, man, he looks pretty good in uniform, throwing the football. He has the look of a really good quarterback. Carson Beck has earned his reputation in the most important manner possible. Did it on the field against 11-on-11 competition, going back to his junior year when he put up some big numbers in the state of Florida. That's a lot of the reason to like him. Said before, I like Jamie Newman because of just the various highlight packages I've seen of him. I think it's kind of fun to have a quarterback at Georgia that looks different than maybe some of what we've had at Georgia in the past. I like everything about what Georgia currently has, the quarterback position. I still think there's room for one more. I like the idea of JT Daniels. And frankly, it's kind of nice to have as much energy on the offensive side of the ball for a change as there is with this prodigious Georgia defense, where there's lots of recruiting success, lots of anticipation, lots of excitement. Sometimes it seems like the offense takes a back seat to the defense in Georgia with good reason when you look at the overall results of the two groups. But when you're adding a big-time quarterback to go along with the way that wide receivers were recruited for the past class, what's going on the running back position, how could you not, if you're a fan, take this as good news? I don't know how it works out, but boy, I can't wait to get my popcorn out and watch it all unfold.
I think to sum up BA's point, I'd like to quote one Montgomery Burns. I'd take all the wealth in the world and I'd trade it all away for just a little bit more.
That is exactly right. Mike, with that said, Kirby Smart spoke to reporters today. Update on how Georgia's going to navigate the world of coronavirus and everything else. What did you take from what you heard from Smart? And would you mind maybe just kind of previewing it for those that didn't get a chance to see it?
Sure. A lot of protocols in place, BA. We know the June 8th date was announced by the SEC last Friday after the NCAA approved a return to campus as early as June 1st on Wednesday. And so the SEC voted on June 8th. I think Nebraska is one of the teams that's reporting back June 1st, but most of the programs, the earliest June 8th, Clemson, June 8th, and the ACC, I believe those programs are allowed to decide for themselves, Big Ten as well, Michigan a holdout in the Big Ten. But as for Georgia, June 8th is when they can start workouts, but they're going to be on campus before then. Hearing a lot about June 2nd, June 3rd, June 4th, because these kids are going to have to go through a lot of screening, a lot of testing, a lot of medicals. They'll all be COVID-19 tested. Some of them will be screened and tested before they return to campus, depending on, where they're coming from and if they've been symptomatic or anything like that. So they really set the table. This is where having a guy like Ron Corson and, fans roll their eyes or go to sleep when they hear the director of sports medicine's name. But let me tell you, this is more important than ever that you've got a globally renowned guy like Ron Corson to write your protocol, to set up these programs, because you can't afford a misstep. We had Greg McGarity on yesterday, and he said now comes the hard part, because there are a lot of hoops to jump through. It's not just getting your football team ready for the season. It's making sure they follow this protocol so that you don't have a COVID-19 outbreak on your team. For example, groups of 20 will then be divided into groups of 7 for workouts. When they go through the football building, they will go through as groups of 7. There's one door in and one door out to avoid the potential for contamination. The facility will be clean. The weight room and the indoor facility will be cleaned between these groups as the team filters through for these workouts. If someone tests positive for COVID-19, that player will have the option to return home or to go into a quarantine situation on the Georgia campus. They'll maintain these groups of 20 / subdivision into 7 so that if one player does become positive, they've got a quarantine situation of the other players that have been working out with them. They won't change those groups up. So this will also help. So there's just so many protocols and so much has gone into place. And it was really refreshing to hear Kirby Smart be on the front end of giving the nation a look at what the new norm is for college football. I haven't heard any other programs discuss their protocols to the extent and in the detail that Kirby Smart did today. He did so confidently. He made it very clear that,
Guys, breaking news. JT Daniels just announced his commitment to Georgia.
There you go.
Well, there we go.
Breaking news. JT Daniels is officially in the fold for UGA, announcing his commitment. Some of the internet sleuths kind of already seen.
I'm gonna punch out on that and get that up if you guys can go cover. You guys can go to the Cover 3 cloud for the remainder.
All right, sounds good, Mike. Thanks for stopping by.
Appreciate it, guys.
Some internet sleuths had already kind of identified what they thought was a name bearing a very close resemblance to Daniels in the Georgia student directory, and now he's officially made it official that he is on his way to UGA. And Jeff, seeing what happens next from this should be quite interesting.
Internet sleuths, Brandon, do they provide the online chatter?
Internet sleuths are oftentimes the source of online chatter. Yes, that's exactly right.
Can we say Georgia has a future Brett Favre type quarterback coming into the fold? Do you like that, or you like the Aaron Rodgers comparison to keep it tally?
I mean, listen, I'll take whatever I can get, I guess. Yeah, I mean, those both sound pretty good all the way around. So, I mean, there's a lot about this I don't know, but I'm fascinated to see where it goes for sure.
And I mean, I don't know, like this will all come out, but to me, how in the world, again, you make this move sight unseen? Because we know that JT Daniels hasn't visited Georgia officially on campus since the campus has been closed for quite some time. To me, I would be the most stunning part of this development is not five-star quarterback is chosen Georgia. The most stunning part of this development to me, Brandon, would be if he came to Georgia to sit out 2020 in advance of what would happen, what he could have done at USC. And Brandon, that's some quick graphics you got right there. How do you feel about number 18? What's the legacy of number 18 under center at Georgia? Wayne Johnson. You got to go all the way back to Wayne Johnson.
86 Georgia Auburn. Yeah, it's a cool looking edit. Pretty good job all the way around. I kind of like that. Yeah, Wayne Johnson, the 86 win, the Wet Dogs game at Jordan-Hare Stadium. I mean, I get what you're saying, and we'll get ready to wrap up after this because we've kind of covered all this ground by now. But I get what you're saying about he's not coming to Georgia to sit. But if he's decided he doesn't want to be at USC, then he's at the mercy of the NCAA about sitting wherever he goes. To me, the only thing I know for sure about JT Daniels is he doesn't want to be at USC. And maybe that's for good reason. Maybe that's for not. Obviously, I would assume, going to try to get media eligible. Who wouldn't push for that, especially when you got the years to spare. But the only thing I know for sure about Daniel's situation is that he wanted out of L.A. Most smart people do.
That's not true. LA is a wonderful place, just not right now when you can't do anything.
I'm kidding. I'm playing around. But you get my point on that, Jeff. I mean, I'm not comfortable saying anything more than apparently he just doesn't like it at USC anymore.
Apparently he wants to play for that Todd Monken offense, Brandon.
Connor, how about anything from you? Anything else you're seeing online? Cool edit. I like the edit.
Yeah, it's a well done. The Georgia graphics department, as usual, is pretty good at what they do. So, it's interesting how fast this all moved. There hadn't been a lot of, as you like to say, online chatter when it comes to Daniels recently, and just sort of out of nowhere he picks Georgia. So, again, I think as we've said over and over and over again, it comes down to how eligible is he, and will he be able to compete for that 2020 job? Or, as I think you and I both sort of agree here, BA, is what does he do during the 2021 season?
Yeah, and listen, I'll add to this and we'll let you both comment and then we'll get ready to go. As a fan, I also like the fact he's not going to Tennessee. Or not going to listen, as much as I want Georgia to have quarterback depth, I want teams that play Georgia to not have that quarterback depth. So Daniels not being at Tennessee, that alone for me is a win without even knowing how good he'll end up being.
So Brandon, next year you'll see things that Georgia could have 2 former 5-star quarterbacks in the quarterback room, 2 former 4-star quarterbacks in the quarterback room. Might have had a future first-round draft pick in the 2020 quarterback room.
Yeah, how are they going to keep all these guys 6 feet apart, by the way? They're going to have to annex some land just to do social distancing during their quarterback drills.
Hey, man, that's what the new expansion of the facilities like, man. They need to have a bigger quarterback room, 15 chairs, 10 chairs in there. It's going to look like the defensive back and wide receivers room for Georgia.
Be careful of those chairs. That's all
Brandon.
I'm going to say about that. You may wish you had coronavirus if you start messing around with those chairs.
Get some rubber coated chairs or whatever. No sharp edges. But Brandon, look at this. The transfer portal giveth, and the transfer formal, let me just say that backwards. The transfer portal taketh away a 5-star from the 2018 class. In 2018 class, and now the transfer portal returns a 5-star in the 2018 class, and all of a sudden, Georgia's 2018 the lost 5-star quarterback in the 2018 recruiting cycle, they now got one back on campus.
Connor, anything left for you before we leave? Internet reacting yet?
Yeah, it certainly caught the attention of college football at large, and I think this is another sign of Kirby Smart and sort of taking this quarterback situation more seriously and trying to find an answer to what has sort of been his Waterloo, if we're making old-timey references here, of trying to figure this out. And, as you say, having, I think, more talent in the room, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
I don't think so either. Good stuff. Read more from Mike Griffith on this, dognation.com. Probably a lot of fun on this to come in the days ahead. JT Daniels, former 5-star, former starter at USC, transferring to the University of Georgia. We'll find out when he's eligible. We'll find out how he fits into the plans for 2020, 2021, however long into the future you want to go. It'll be fun to watch it play out. Thanks for being here on the Cover 4 broadcast. For Connor Riley, Jeff Sintel, and Mike Griffith, I'm Brandon Adams saying I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for Dog Nation Daily, presented by Kroger. Have a great afternoon, everybody.